Welcome, everybody, to the 100th episode of the Cops and Writers podcast. This is a special episode, and I have with me tonight 4 special guests. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and maybe a little bit of background of where they come from and what law enforcement and or book experience they have. Jerry, ladies first. We got to go ladies first.
Well, thank you. Yes, Jerry Williams here, retired special agent with the FBI. I started a podcast, FBI Retired Case File Review, really, to be honest, as a way to get more people who might be interested in my books, because I had a book coming out 9 months after I had started the podcast. But something happened and the podcast kind of took over everything. And in a few weeks, I will be celebrating my 7th year of leading up the podcast. And I just published my 277th episode. But I am a crime writer. I've written 2 crime books. I'm in the process of writing my 3rd. And I also have 2 nonfiction books, FBI Myths and Misconceptions, and FBI Word Search Puzzles, just a fun book that I did with my son. So if you haven't gotten the theme, everything I write is about the FBI because my mission is...
I was going to ask you for your mission.
Yes, my mission is to show you who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues.
All right. Rick, you're next.
Richard Rybicki, before I go any further than that, congratulations on your 100th episode.
Well, thank you.
Stellar achievement, and you should be very, very proud. It's an outstanding podcast.
Well, thank you. And it's because of guests like you guys and my listeners that I'm actually doing this. That's what makes it fun.
I kind of feel like the turd in the punch bowl here. Like I kind of don't belong with this.
Oh, hell no.
But okay, Richard Rybicki, retired Chicago police officer, finished my career as a homicide lieutenant on the north side of the city. My career spanned, like I said, 29 and a half years. I was a patrol officer, tactical officer, gang crime specialist, homicide detective, burglary detective. Oh, that was a very long month. Gang crime sergeant, patrol sergeant, et cetera, all the way up to homicide lieutenant. I'm also a writer now and published 3 books in a crime thriller series, and I'm about to publish my 4th next month.
Very good. Yay. That's a good feeling, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Dorothy Parker said, I don't like writing, but I like having written.
I like that. Okay. Adam, you're next. The very first guest on the Cops and Writers podcast, my friend, Adam Richardson.
I was your first. Adam Richardson from Writers Detective, and 26 years in counting in law enforcement, 17 of those as a detective. And like Rick mentioned, started in burglary. It's a great place to learn when you're a brand new detective. So burglary, and then major crimes, which for us was sexual assault, robbery, homicide, and then also narcotics, and then our vice and intel unit, which included a stint with the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. And then, I've been helping writers since 2015.
All right. The only non-cop, but does write in the police universe, Michael Anderle. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, which one of these is not like the others? And but anyway, thank you. Congratulations again also on your 100th episode. Glad to be in this August group of individuals. As Richard said, I feel wholly inadequate to everybody here who has a lot of experience. My only experience, even recently getting inside of a police station, was when I got robbed. And I had to go down there and do a report, and that was it.
Where was that? Was that in Vegas?
Yeah, it was in Vegas. We were in Cabo, and then we came back, and our house had been hit. So we had to deal with all of that stuff.
Oh, so your house was burglarized?
Yeah, burglarized whenever we were gone. So that was a little weird experience.
That's not a good feeling.
No, No, the thing is I guess if you want to take something humorous out of it, my wife, who for many, many years has really enjoyed a few nice things, and she takes very good care of them. So she had a lot of purses, some of them Louis Vuitton purses, and some of them Coach. They left every single Coach. They only took the good stuff, left everything else behind, and then a bunch of jewelry, which they couldn't tell apparently was mostly fake. So it is what it is. But they left my stuff alone. I'm looking around going, oh, they didn't take this, they didn't take that. I think they grabbed one of my ammo backpacks just and dumped everything out just to throw more of her shit into it.
Wow.
So there you go. You missed it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I released my first book back in 2015. Released 4 of them that year, a whole bunch of them the next year, and went from zero in income to 100,000 a month in about 12 months. So that's kind of what I'm known for. Started the 20 books to 50K group in February of 2016 with 4 of the readers who wanted to be authors, and then grew that significantly. And that's really taken on a life of its own with a ton of people who invest their time, efforts, and energy into it. And it's a little over, I think, 56,000 people in that group. And just, trying to go around, help as I can. Otherwise, just trying to keep the LMBPN train going. As we published about 1,750 books so far in the last 7 years.
Wow. 1,750. Do you have an idea on sales for all that?
Yeah, it's in excess of 20 million.
God. Wow. Did you ever think when you started this? I mean, I've had you on the show, as a guest, you and Craig, and you started out with Google, right?
Well, no, I was a Google certified ads person
ads guy,
at the time,
yeah.
so I knew that. Before that, I was in marketing. Before that, I was in IT. So I came IT, and then I went IT for a marketing company, but I also knew sales and other things, and was a consultant for a while, integrating sales and IT. At the time that I started writing, I was white labeling some, believe it or not, so some window drapery type stuff, window blinds for a company. Hated it. And so I had a really large idea that if I could get books to sell, I wouldn't ever get called for them. Books never called in sick. They never, gave me any issues, and they didn't want to do stuff, and they just sold every single day. And so, whenever my first books made any money, all I could do is see I could get out of doing what I was doing. So I worked really hard. It took maybe 2 days off in 3.5 years to get everything going.
Wow. Okay. I asked my Facebook group, what they want more of out of the podcast. And a lot of people are just keep on saying, it's like, I love to hear war stories, from your time as a cop, or, that type of thing. So I have asked you all that are cops for some war stories. So I don't know who wants to start, but let's start out with a war story where you could be a little more serious, or you kind of shook your head like, what the hell? Where did that come from? So who wants to start that one? Rick, look at you.
Okay. This is a case that haunted me. Still does. I still have dreams about it over 30, almost 40 years later.
Okay.
And it's not a homicide.
Really?
Yeah. It was,
wow.
I was a homicide detective. And as a homicide detective, we were sent out on all manner of deaths, suspicious, accidental, suicides. And one morning, I'm on my way to work. There was a horrible storm, very high winds, a lot of rain, but very short. Didn't last long. So when I finally get to the office, they said, don't take your coat off, take your coffee to go. You've got a death investigation, downed wires, electrocution, downed wires. So I go out to the scene and I pull up, and the police officer's there. The Commonwealth Edison truck, the electric company truck, is out there dealing with the wires. He tells me it's safe. And the first thing I noticed was the tarp covering the body. And this body was small.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my God, this is a child. And it was a young child. And I don't want to get, for your listeners, I don't want to get too graphic, but it was a horrible scene. One of the worst I've ever seen. I couldn't believe that a bare electrical wire could do this to a body. It was really hard to take, very tough. And it was in a low-income neighborhood, and high crime, low-income neighborhood. And the guy in the electric truck started bitching at me saying, this is their own fault. What do you mean by their own fault? And he says, these people, they're stealing the electricity, they're jerry-rigging the wires to their house, and that's why they come down. And I kind of read him the riot act, sent him on his way, walked into the house, which is right next door. It was a TL, it was right there. The poor family, they were just heartbroken, distraught. So I talked to him a little bit, and I gave him the name of the best lawyer I could possibly come up with, personal injury lawyer, the best in the city. And I told them I hope they could sue their ass off. It was a horrible scene, just the worst I've ever seen. And I'm sorry that's a downer, but you asked for a war story.
No, we will get funnier later to that. No, this is not funny, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I've got a couple funny ones too.
Oh yeah, we'll get funny and heartwarming. How's that? All right, who's next?
Well, I can well, it's a war story, but to tag on to and hopefully give the listeners an idea of what do you do if you're writing a scene like that, right? Where do you go from here? How do we react to it? I had a sergeant where after it was another child case. This was a SIDS death, but it was actually my training officer that this happened to, where he was a father of a young child at the same time, where he just went on this SIDS death, a sudden infant death syndrome, and it was absolutely affecting him, my training officer. And the sergeant said, hey, meet me in our area. We have, one of those dive bars that's open at 6 a.m., for all the locals to go to that need a drink at 6 a.m.
For the late shift cops. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he said, hey, I need you to back me up over at this bar. So, and it's literally like 7 o'clock in the morning. And he shows up thinking he's backing him on a search or, bar check or something like that, and walks in, and there's a shot of tequila on the bar. And he's like, drink that. He's like, Sarge, I'm in uniform. I can't do that. He's like, I don't drink it. So he's like, okay. He drinks that shot of tequila. He's like, you've been drinking. You need to go home. It was like taking care of his guys, and it's like, you have to give some sort of recognize the emotional toll that it takes on you, and, because if you gave him an out, if you told him, you know what, I think you need to take some time off or decompress, he's going to be, I'm fine. But it was like, by creating that, not only a human connection, but also making it of, you've been drinking on duty. Obviously he didn't get written up or anything like that, but it was that I forced you into this position to take care of yourself, because you can't then undo that drink, right? And go back on patrol and tell the boss, no, I'm okay, I'm going to be fine, that kind of thing. Now, the boss might get in trouble nowadays, but back in the day, it was one of those things where, having a boss that prioritized the troops rather than their career, and doing the right thing for them really made a difference. So just thinking about the position of how are you as a writer, how are you going to then have your character or the bosses around that character to react to sort of those sort of things, I think is really key. And sometimes kind of those little glimpses into how we deal with that. Obviously there's a ton of gallows humor and that kind of stuff, but the gallows humor kind of stops when we're talking about children. Yes. Don't the funny stories about all the, the crazy stuff that we see. But yeah, it's just some food for thought and something that I encountered in my career.
Absolutely. The thing about the gallows humor with the children, it was okay for almost any manner of death, any person except children. They were off limits always. There was no one would tolerate that.
Right. Jerry?
Well, I didn't work violent crime during my career. I spent most of my career working economic crime, frauds, excuse me, frauds and advanced fee schemes, Ponzi schemes. But I did have a case. I'm going to bring up the level of emotion a little bit, but it was an emotional case for me because it was a combination mortgage scam, drug case where drug dealers, I guess there was a time when they all wanted to be what was his name? Stringer Bells, where they wanted to, they wanted to go from being a drug dealer to becoming businessmen. And so, and Camden, New Jersey, is actually served by the Philadelphia office. And Camden, for years, was one of the murder capital and drug capitals of the country. And we had a drug dealer who was buying up houses, supposedly renovating them, but really doing a really terrible job of renovating them, and then getting people in the neighborhood to lie on mortgage applications in order to be able to buy these houses, which sounds kind of nice in a way because now they purchase a house, but they purchased a house without really having the income to pay for it because they lied on the application.
Okay.
And then the house was renovated really just very poorly. So at some point, the cabinets are going to fall down and the toilet's going to back up, etc. So I wasn't part of the investigation because of the mortgage fraud aspect, but I was also working with the agent in Camden who was going after the drug dealer for the drugs. And we were able to get an informant who he was in his like maybe 19 or 20 and had been, involved in drugs all of his life. That's what he knew, and that's what he was going to be. And it was very, very proud moment for me to be able to say by the end of our investigation, which took about a year and a half to 2 years, he started out as a drug dealer informant with 4 baby mamas and 4 kids. And by the end of our time with him, we were able to get him to get paternity suits, find out only 2 of the kids were his, and for him actually to petition for custody. We got him relocated to Delaware, where by the time we were done with the case, not only was he a great witness for us in the investigation, but he was attending PTA meetings for his 2 sons and had gotten a job as a truck driver. And I'm very, very proud of that case. Very, very proud. I've lost touch with him, unfortunately, but it was always a proud moment. I actually, when I became the spokesperson for Philadelphia, I got the Philadelphia Inquirer to actually write a story up about him and his transformation, because that's how proud I was of this guy. So it's just a nice story, a nice war story to talk about how law enforcement can come into a situation and see the potential in the people that they're dealing with, and know that just because they're doing quote unquote bad things don't make them bad people, and can maybe help them, transition and transform themselves into, good law abiding citizens. So I'm really proud of that.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good story. I have a not good story. Yeah, I'll end this little chapter with, it's 7:00 in the morning. I'm working midnight to 8. I get called to a shooting. I'm like, great. Well, I'm not going home on time, but oh well, so be it. And the fire department's working on a guy that's on somebody's front porch. And paramedics are there. They got leads all over them. They're doing whatever they're doing, and they more or less were like, yeah, he's gone. And I'm like, well, where's he shot? And then they're like, I'm on the sidewalk still, and said, come up and look. We don't even know what this is. His head looked like a pumpkin. I found his ear in the bushes next to this front porch. And what happened was, this guy owed $20 to the local dope man. This is like a very, very rough neighborhood. And the dope man is the drug dealer. So he owed the drug dealer $20. So the drug dealer gave 3 neighborhood kids ranging in ages from 16 to 17 $20 a piece. It says, go get my $20 and work them over. All right. He's trying to save face, because he doesn't want people thinking that you can rip me off. That's not going to happen in my world. So mob mentality kicked in. Before you know it, there's 9 or 10 kids ranging in ages from 10 to 18, 10 years old. So they chase this guy down. He winds up on this front porch, and they start beating him with a baseball bat, a rake, anything they could find, all these like gardening appliances and just whatever they could find. And they literally beat him to death. And he was trying to get into this house, and you could see the scratch marks by the windows. He's trying to get in, open the windows and trying to get in the windows. And he's literally clawing for his life. And this happened at 2:00 in the morning. And nobody on that block called the police. Somebody called at 7:00 in the morning because they were going to work. The sun is up, and they're like, well, that doesn't look right. So we had to kick down the door to the house, and they're like, we're not saying anything, because they were scared of the drug dealer. And the whole block was just like, we don't know. But we did a canvas. We found out what happened, just what I said. And the 10-year-old, that's what shocked me the most. Mob mentality. What people don't understand is when mob mentality kicks in, you could have people that are marginally rational become very unrational very quickly. I don't know what the psychology is behind it, but boy, I've seen it on more than one occasion where quote unquote normal people, when they're being motivated and there's a situation where things just get out of hand, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. So what happened was the 10-year-old actually, and witnesses said that this 10-year-old was jumping up and down on this poor man's head like a trampoline. There was blood coming out of his eyes. And he went home, stripped off all of his clothes, and put them in a garbage bag and hid them in his closet. 10 years old. I don't know where you go from there. I remember when we arrested everybody. I worked till probably 4 or 5 o'clock that evening. And slowly but surely, like one by one, all these kids were coming down to the detective bureau, and we're like in a little report writing room. It was like, yep, there's another. And I didn't know about the 10-year-old back, at that point in time. And the wagon driver is probably 6'5", 300 pounds, this huge dude with this 10-year-old kid. And I'm like, what is he here for? And he's like, well, the deal we're working on. I'm like, who are we going to get to question him? Big Bird? Is he going to write out his confession in crayon? And I'm like, yeah, this is just, it just blew my mind. And then later on, I found out, since, because of his age, he was, I don't want to say institutionalized. We did away more or less with juvenile prisons. And because of his age, he was closely monitored. And as soon as he turned 17, he killed somebody else. So he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. So that was, I hate to be Debbie Downer, but and this was all unfolding. And we didn't know all of this story. And there was a brand new sergeant that, he just got his stripes like maybe a couple of days before this happened. And the day shift lieutenant's calling, and he's screaming at him on the phone. He says, how come nobody has told me about this, mass, mob killing? And we're like, we don't even know what we have. Well, CNN knows. He's watching CNN in the lieutenant's office, and they have the story, but we don't. I don't know how they got it. And he says, yeah, those stripes on your arm come off just as easy as they went on, mister. He said, they're fucking Velcro. They're gone. And I'm just like, and he's just getting his ass chewed, and he's just doing his job. He didn't do anything wrong. And I was going to get promoted like in a month to sergeant. I'm like, do I really want this job? It's like, I'm happy being a street cop. This is fine, but yeah, so that was that. And
Yeah.
that was
We
probably
also
one of
had
the
a-
worst.
We also had a case in Chicago where one gang, they would send the young kids out to do their hits because, for one, they were expendable. For two, they're not going to serve big time
Right.
if they get caught. And there was a 10-year-old that did a hit on another gang member.
A 10-year-old.
Yeah, I forget the 10-year-old's name. I think his nickname was Juicy, maybe. So he did the hit, but boom, we found out about it real quick. And everyone's out on the street looking for this 10-year-old. And next thing you know, a couple days later, they find his body under a viaduct with two in the back of the head. His own gang killed him because they knew he was a hot commodity and he'd give it up.
Wow. All right. Well, that's the serious stuff. Let's move on to something more lighthearted, please. Okay. So, people want to know war stories. How about something amusing or funny or something along those lines? Rick, I know you got a good one. Why don't you start out?
I got a couple. I told you the Sean Penn story before, but I'm not going to do that one here. It's too long.
Okay.
But, again, as a detective, I had a ride along, movie star ride along. He was filming the movie Chucky. That was Chris Sarandon. He was filming the movie Chucky in Chicago. And so he wanted to ride along with a couple of detectives because he was playing a Chicago police detective. So me and my partner got the short straw, and he was riding with us. And he was a nice enough guy. In fact, he turned me on to The Princess Bride. It's a great movie.
Yeah, it is.
And anyway, at one point, he's talking to me and my partner from the back seat, and he says to my partner who's driving the car, says, "Listen, I noticed that you wear your gun on your hip, and your partner, meaning me, wears a shoulder rig, a shoulder holster. Why is that?" And my partner goes into this long explanation about why I like the cross draw, et cetera, and it's better for him on this hip and why. And he goes through all of this, and Chris Sarandon's like, "Oh, that's really interesting." I said, "That's all bullshit." And Chris Sarandon's like, "What are you talking about?" And even my partner is looking at me like, hey, shut up. Don't screw me on this. I said, "Well, the real reason is," and I was a young, slim guy back then, concerned about, a new detective, got to look sharp. I said, "Well, actually, the reason I wear a shoulder rig is because the gun and the handcuffs, they kind of ruined the cut of my pants. I'm carrying it on my hip." And they didn't like that. And then it went on from there where I realized that his sister was Susan Sarandon, and I kept asking him about her. And he finally says, "Don't ask me about my sister again." So, okay. That was the cute little story.
All right. Jerry or Adam?
I'll let you go, Jerry. I'm trying to think of cute and funny. I don't know.
I made a list.
Even hijinks like within the squad. Cop humor. So while you guys are thinking, I'll go with, I have a whole bunch, but one of my favorites, probably my favorite sergeant, Jim Byer, God bless his soul. He was just a jokester. His roll calls were, you wanted to go to roll call because he would just have you rolling. He was just that guy. And we had a newer cop. He was kind of cocky. He was a really good cop. And he played college football. And he got a short little spot in Varsity Blues. And there was a part in Varsity Blues where the coach is all angry with the team at halftime and dumps the table full of Gatorade. There's all the Gatorade cups and the huge thing of Gatorade. He dumps it all over, and he looks at all these football players and he says, "I don't care about your muscles, blah, blah," and chews them all out. Well, I was very impressed with his tech savviness because he found that clip, and this copper thought that nobody knew he was in this movie because he's not wearing a shirt. He's just wearing football pants and just like posed, all studly, whatever. So the sergeant plays the clip. And, this poor copper is just shrinking in his seat, he just covered his face. And he's like, I don't care about your muscle, Slomchesky. And he throws the clipboard like across the room at roll call. Well, that was funny the first time. He did it for like maybe 2 or 3 months straight. Every time that cop was there, every time. And he's like, Sarge, this is funny the first couple of times. Do you have to keep doing this? Yes, I do have to keep doing this. And he just would not let up. Oh my God. That's probably one of my funnier stories. You guys got anything else? Adam, Jerry.
Jerry's trying to talk.
She is. You're
not hearing
you. Jerry.
You're muted.
Yeah, she's turning off the mute.
You got muted somehow.
Okay.
There you are.
I touched my mic. I know I was not muted, but I had touched my microphone in the wrong spot.
Darn it.
Yes. Well, I was just going to say that I can't think of anything, but that was my funny part right there. How's that?
Oh, okay. That's your shtick. Adam?
Well, you know what? I had to say, I had to hold up. This should be about you. I don't want to tell you how to do your own show, but I want to talk more about your show and this accomplishment that you've had of 100 episodes.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
But this is what the people wanted, so this is what I'm giving them.
Okay.
All right. Okay, we can finish this line of questioning with something heartwarming. That's one thing that a lot of writers don't get is when they write their police characters, it's either the stoic person that has like no personality for the most part, kind of the Joe Friday, Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, blah, blah, blah. Or they're the Mel Gibson from Lethal Weapon that's on the edge, that's crazy, that's breaking all the rules, etc. So when you're writing your characters, they're people too. They've got families, they've got problems, they've got hobbies, they've got just like everybody else. They happen to have a unique job that has unique situations and problems and all that. But something heartwarming. How about you guys have anything heartwarming?
I think the key thing to remember is, the cliche is certainly that, you become this hardened copper that, doesn't have any emotion left. But we all got into this career because we care. And that doesn't mean that ever went away. I think most of us, have spent money to pay for somebody's meal or even put somebody in a hotel room or buy them a sleeping bag, but we don't turn around and make a story about it, right? This is not a TikTok thing. This is not a news item. This is not a thing on the news. It's what you do when you're compassionate and you want to help other people. And it might be something that gets you teased by your squad mates.
Oh, yes.
But it doesn't mean that we don't do it, right? So maybe they're nicer when no one else is looking than you would necessarily give them credit for, I think would be because I've done all three of the above, to the point where I even went, like I was on my way home, like to visit my folks kind of thing. And, it was freezing cold outside and I happened to be stopping because I'm a procrastinator and did pick up the last gift on my Christmas list. And I bought a sleeping bag for a guy that I saw that, desperately needed one. And part of it was that it was Christmas, but at the same time, it was because he's a human being who is going to freeze to death and it's freaking Christmas Eve. So I can spend the extra $20 to do that. But this is the first time I've ever told that story. And it's not because it's just the right thing to do. And I certainly get to the point in like we all have where we've seen this stuff where we're not necessarily having the normal emotional reactions to things because a lot of that is dulled down, right? Stuff.
Right.
That, I know that my wife has a hard, like she'll hear something and just internalize like, oh my gosh, I can't. And to me, it doesn't even blip on the emotional radar to me where I'm like, ooh, maybe there is something wrong with me after all these years where that doesn't get the correct emotional response.
It cannot not change you, that's for sure. But I'll start out with my first partner was a female, and her main job was being a mom. She had 2 little girls at home, and she took off a year each time she had a kid. She went off the books for a year. And, it was like 364 days, because if it was over a year, then you'd have to start all over again. You'd have to go back to the academy and all that BS. So they had the financial means, etc. So her heart was with kids. So it's a busy, oh God, it was like 4th of July or something like that. And we're milking a hitch, which means we were on an assignment. We cleared from it, but we didn't tell the dispatcher because we were both starving. We wanted to get something to eat. So, we're on a different side of town. We're supposed to be in one spot, and we were like in a different spot, and we get flagged down, which is what you cringe and are completely scared to death of, because they're like, oh shit, I'm not even here right now, technically. So it's a woman with 3 little kids. And it's like, yes, ma'am, what can we do for you? And I'm just waiting for I just got robbed, our car got stolen, whatever. And what was there from out of town? It wasn't the best neighborhood, but it wasn't the worst. And they were just lost. They had no idea where they were. She had very little money, and wherever they were going to stay, that fell through. And she was just, she looked like a lost puppy with these 3 kids. And I was just like, ugh. So my partner Patty's like, oh, we'll give you a ride. And I'm like, we will? Okay. And she said, we'll find you a hotel. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, we will? How is this all going to happen? We're like 30, 40 assignments behind, which means as soon as we go back into service, they're going to give us something. There's like shootings. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah. I mean, that's the way it is. And I'm just like, okay, Patty. So she's got this little like 4-year-old kid, and she's bouncing the kid on her knee in the front of the squad car up front. And she's got the mom and the 2 other kids in the back. And she's like, come on, find these people a hotel. And I'm like, sure. So, this is the old days when I forget what kind of cell phone I had, but it was very low speed technically. And I find a hotel in Fox Point, which is not Milwaukee. It's about, I don't know, half an hour away from where we are. Okay. So we're not in our squad area. We're still on a hitch on an assignment way wherever. And now we're going to leave the city. We should have like 3 car seats. I mean, I looked at her, I said, we're just piling up the suspension days right now. You do realize that, right? And she's like, we have to do the right thing. And I'm like, ugh. So sure enough, the Milwaukee Police Department cab took the family to Fox Point and made sure they got in there. And she may or may not have given them some money and sent them on their way. And then the rest of the night, it was running and gunning all night long. But we had to do it.
And, and those are the stories that people don't hear when they talk about cops and, all the bad stuff. It's because, unfortunately, we're not able to promote some of the good stuff, all of the good stuff that we do, because, I mean, if you told that story when it happened, you'd be written up.
Yeah, I would. It's like, oh boy, my sergeant better not hear this, kind of thing. So yeah, technically I was supposed to call the lieutenant. Can I leave the city? You just can't leave the city. It says Milwaukee on the side of the squad car. You just don't go gallivanting around all over the place, especially when it's a holiday weekend. And like I said, the hitches were just piling up. They'd be like, they're on their own. They got to find their own way.
And that's exactly what Adam was talking about, when you're writing a story, a crime novel, to add some of that in is so refreshing and unique and different. And, something that a lot of people aren't going to think about because they're looking at the model that they see from other crime novels or from TV shows, right, where they don't show that side. And that's really important to put that in.
Rick, you got anything?
As an author, I do have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious. There's things that you see on YouTube. One of the ones that really appealed to me one time was a time when there was a dancer in a mall, and he was just messing around and stuff, and you get 2 cops who come up, and everyone who was watching the dancer was like, oh dear goodness, okay, something's really going to go on. They really like the dancer. All of a sudden, the 2 cops started dancing with the dancer in the same moves they were doing, which as a civilian, I'm sitting here going, that is so cool. Have any of you ever done something where you're supposed to go and maybe tell them, tone it down, but you just end up joining them?
Well, I shoot a couple of hoops with some kids in the alley.
I was just gonna say, yeah, in Milwaukee, the parks close at 10 o'clock on a hot summer night when it's 90 degrees, 100 degrees. And in these neighborhoods, most people don't have air conditioning. So it's hopping at night. It's almost like reverse. And these kids are out there playing hoops. And like what you just said, Rick, even in the parks, and it's like, well, are they hurting anything? Are they shooting up the place or whatever? Nah.
Same thing we would do is on those hot summer nights, they open up the fire hydrants, and they just to cool off, they're opening up the fire hydrants and the kids are playing in it. And they'd send us out, hey, go close the fire hydrant. We wouldn't close them. I know the fire department got really angry with us for doing that, but I couldn't be the joy killer,
Right.
You're playing in the water, You don't have a swimming pool, you're not near the lake. Have a good time.
You can let the fire department be the bad guys for
You
once.
tell them.
Everybody loves the fire department.
Even if we turned it off, as soon as we left, they turn it back on. So there was no point.
Well,
yeah, we definitely get sent to a lot of things that are not really police problems.
Yeah.
And sometimes that works horrendously wrong. Where especially now when we see a lot of the things where officers get involved in critical incidents that were really started because they responded to something that wasn't a crime in the first place. And I think when you recognize that you have no real business being there, I think taking the human track and just kind of picking up the basketball or whatever it is in recognizing, hey, just because they called us doesn't mean we have a reason to intervene in anything.
There's so much common sense that should be involved with that too. One of the cases in the news, not, a little while ago, selling single cigarettes. Who gives a shit? Why should we care about a guy selling single cigarettes? I don't get that. I don't get that. Common sense should have dictated, hey, move on down the street for a little while, go away, but you can't do it right here. Go there, 10 feet away.
Right.
It just boggles my mind. We did have one. This is when I was getting broken in on the job as a homicide detective. My partner, a very experienced detective, a funny guy too. And when we were walking into the office, we just happened to bump into each other as we're going into work, and we're taking the elevator upstairs to the detective division. He says to me, geez, I hope we catch a homicide tonight. I said, what? I said, what? You're hoping some poor mope gets killed? Why? And he's like, I'm building a garage. I can use the overtime. Yeah, I said, at one level, I can understand you needing the overtime, but I don't understand why you're hoping somebody gets killed just so you can build your garage. Wow. Well, sure enough, later that night, we catch a homicide. Yeah. We catch a homicide, but it was of a woman, a prostitute that we have had dealings with in the past. And we worked it probably for 24, 30 hours straight. He didn't put in an overtime slip. We had to put in slips for overtime. He didn't ask for overtime. He just went home. He gave that time.
So he felt bad about what he said.
Yeah. I don't think so much bad about what he said, but more bad about this was somebody we knew.
Sure.
Somebody at some level we cared about,
right.
Somebody who was forced into a situation on the streets that she found the only way out for herself, and was killed by some jerk she got into a car with.
Yeah. Wow. That's no good. We'll tell you what, let's start talking about writing. And Michael's been so patient up there. Yeah, he's just looking at us like, okay.
I want to hear about this 20 books because
50K?
yeah, I have not gotten into it yet. Only kind of been lurking on the Facebook page, but I'm really interested in it because I want to sell a lot more books.
Well, I'm going to start out with Michael with, we're closing, and this is going to mirror what you're saying, Rick. We're closing in on 20,000, 22. We're going into 2023. In 2022, what trends or patterns have you seen, Michael, as far as what's selling books? What's, I know that's a broad question and it does vary by genre, etc. But in general, let's say, Rick, he's got an older, when did you write that 3-book series?
I started in 2016. 3 books since then, and like I said, a 4th book coming out next month.
Right, and they're crime thrillers.
Yes.
So what do you think is the best avenue to take? He's got 3 books, so he's got a series, and he just recovered them. The covers are a lot better now. You're redoing the blurbs. What steps do you think what more should he do?
So you've got some real challenges because you're not releasing in a way that's going to get any Amazon algorithms. So I don't know, you're probably not seeing any sales from Kindle Unlimited. I would consider, if you're not wide, to go wide, because then at least you can do things across the world much more effectively and acquire a larger audience. More than likely, a lot of the genres you guys and Jerry are in happen to be more of a situation where you have a lot of readers who read fewer books a year. Unlike the Kindle Unlimited, you have a lot of what I call whale readers, which are people who are just insatiable about reading books over and over and over again. And they're probably on a budget. So their preferred form of entertainment, they pay $9.99. They read everything they want. But the interesting thing is, thrillers in that whole genre, the second largest genre that's out there right behind romance. I typically sit in science fiction and urban fantasy. So I look adoringly at the sales in the areas that you guys have books. And so, but looking at it, there's a lot of situations where you could possibly charge more for your books and things that are going on, go wide. Also, there's something that's, with everything that's going on right now, especially with AI and other stuff that's, in the news, I call it being a bespoke author. And what that means is that one of the best advertising is going to be, frankly, you. You're going to have to be willing to get out there like Jerry has and release, and had, by the way, fantastic idea on your podcast, but get to be known, interaction with the people. So Richard, you might not be able to put out books really fast, but you might be able to put out little vignettes. And there's technology called, I think it's called Whisper right now, which allows you to switch from speech to text damn near flawlessly, really efficient. And so what you might consider, Richard, is just doing, starting a shtick where, maybe spend 5 minutes telling a story and that's it. But you can put that story using Whisper really quick into text. 1 hour of text is approximately 9,000 words, 150 words a minute. That's 750 words. That's actually a really good amount. You might do it on Medium because you have something that's more classic, more nonfiction versus a fiction situation, but point to your fiction books. And, just put up these vignettes consistently, reliably. Patreon, allow people to actually encourage you, because there are a lot of people, civilians like myself, who would be like, you know what? I appreciate what Richard's done. Not only do I appreciate what he's done by telling me these stories and allowing me to see the inside, that'd be the professional side of me, but also the other part of me. The same thing for you, Jerry. The same thing for you, Adam. Not you, Patrick. I know you too well. And so, but the things that y'all have done with your lives, I'd be willing to invest a few dollars monthly just to go keep doing what you're doing. I love the fact that you're having a second career after you've invested, or a secondary career in the case of Adam, where you've been doing more than this. And there's a lot of ways that technology can,
What do you think of Kindle Vella?
Right now, it's very difficult. Kindle Vella, for those that don't know, is the serialized content. I do know of one individual, it's not in your genre, that's out there. Generally speaking, serialized content is younger audiences. Romance is a big thing. If you look at not Webtoons, that's the other one.
I'm seriously considering of writing a romance novel just to make money.
Very difficult on the marketing. You have people who are really good at marketing, and then you have those that do romance. Just saying, it's a complete level above.
Right. I'm terrible at marketing, and that's my problem.
Yeah, I perhaps would stay away from romance then. Just saying, but really, it's going to be you. You're the best marketing.
So you were talking about those like vignettes, like 10,000 word, stories. Where would you put those up on?
750.
Okay. Where would you put
750? Honestly, I would still look at good. I'd look at Medium because it's a platform that can pay you money, but it's also considered a platform that's more for real stuff. A few years ago it was crypto. Now it's actually something else. It's really kind of focused on. But when I go and I want some people who are talking about something, I actually search in Medium first, and I know if I read it, they're going to get a few pennies every time I read just an article. You don't have to put up a lot of stuff, and that's one way to get people to start finding you. And then, of course, what you do is you have the ability to promote yourself at the bottom of every article you do. And if everybody that's listening to your podcast is wanting more war stories, y'all have plenty of war stories. I'd love to talk to Jerry because I happen to create a concept today that happened to have somebody in the FBI, and I'm sitting here going, I'm freaking clueless about the FBI. I'm gonna fuck this up. But is that going to stop me? No, because I'm a fiction writer, by God. Yeah, well, fiction the shit out of this. But it would be nice to know that I'm not causing the FBI to secretly laugh at everything that I have in here. Have you seen this stuff he did?
And we would laugh.
But I will bring a lot of attention to you.
Yeah.
I posted a small vignette on Kindle Vella, which is a new thing for me. It's kind of a mashup between Stephen King and Carl Hiaasen, kind of a supernatural comedy thing where the detective can actually talk to his victim, the dead person.
Ooh,
and it's got a couple of reads.
I like that.
But not much. And I thought it was a really good concept, and I want to develop this more, but I just want to know if I'm going to get if I can attract enough readers to that kind of thing.
Well, if you've got something like that,
you're saying whisper.
Well, I was saying what I was saying in that one was whisper goes from your speech to text to allow you to do some of your vignettes that you can just sit there and talk as an efficient way to get your content out to the masses to learn more about you. Related to this particular one, which is a little bit more paranormal, if you want, Patrick can switch, give you my contact information, and I can have the team throw it to, I can't read it, but for legal and IP reasons, but we have a team of alpha readers who would probably like something who's willing to give you, or just, send through the chain, the link, and I'll send them over there to go check it out. Or hell, let me know, and then we'll put it in one of our email lists and we'll say, hey, go check this out. The author would like some feedback on whether or not, this has got any legs.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, Look at that. We're making deals live. This is amazing. So, Michael, we're closing
a series of books with that thing, but I'm not sure. I just don't know. It's something really different for me.
So, Michael, we're closing in on 2023. There's, publishing is always changing. It's, nothing stays the same. What do you, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but with AI and all these other things like that, what do you see changing? And what should we be preparing for?
Let me couch this a little bit to make sure that people realize from what viewpoint I'm coming from. LMBPN is arguably one of the premier indie publishing companies in the world. We publish anywhere from 300 to 400 books a year minimum. And I feel that AI is an existential threat to the future of my company. Because, I built the company on going fast. Mm-hmm. And I realized that the advantage that LMBPN has had can be gone. Well, not necessarily be gone, but can be gone. And so you can be assured that I'm staying up late at night, if you will, or getting up really early in the morning, figuring out how to make sure we survive How does that affect the individual author? Not nearly as much, but you should absolutely be all over the tools, techniques, and technologies that allow you to do better. There are many tools right now, of which pseudo-write is one of them, Whisper's another. The other technologies that are out there in order to get your product to market. You know, I've spoken from stage about Deep L. That's DEEP, the letter L. Deep L translation. Why have your books in only English? You know, there's ways to get it out there, even if, you know, the methodologies and making sure that it's correct in that language is still challenging, but you can get past the hard part. And so I believe there's a lot that we should be aware of. If you're in a group, they're probably talking about it. You could be talking about things that are emotionally evocative about AI, but legally not an issue. I hear that all the time. This is illegal. That's illegal.
Right.
Not in America, it's not. You might want to consider ethics, but it's not illegal. And y'all are probably the best ones to talk about the difference on that one. It seems FBI might be right up there on that. But that's a change. Do you want to do better blurbs, but you can't figure out how to do it? Almost 90% of all authors probably suck at blurbs.
Absolutely.
Use AI. Just ask it. Here you go. And it'll give you something better than 90% of all authors can do.
Wow. You know, another thing that comes to my mind is narration. You know, AI
I didn't
narration.
want to say that. I've already been on the chopping block with that fight.
Oh, okay. Because not as much with fiction yet, even though, you know, it's learning, okay, I want a Samuel L. Jackson voice. You know, and they map out all of his, you know, they listen to hours and hours of him talking. Then all of a sudden he can narrate my book. It won't be perfect and it won't have the inflections, because if you talk to a narrator, they call themselves voice actors. You know, and sometimes, you know, there's more than one. You know, I love audiobooks, and some audiobooks you'll have 2, maybe 3 narrators, and they do a fantastic job. And I can't see how AI could do that. But maybe for a nonfiction book where you're not as concerned about that kind of thing, it would be a whole lot cheaper.
It's, you know, there's one gentleman who I won't throw under the bus, but he actually said it best when I had a conversation with him about 2 months ago. He goes, look, and we spoke about it, not all of the books that I have are profitable enough to invest $2,000 to $3,000 to do a natural narrator. Not all of my fans can afford $15 for an audiobook. Why is there not a value for text to speech that allows us to put out a product at a price point that a lot of my fans can afford and at a quality that they are more than happy with? And yet there's certain groups who want to argue that point because they're like, well, you can only do it this way. And I'm like, okay. And I asked one person who was approaching me and I said, what do you have for me in this business case? And it was absolute silence. They don't have it. And so they don't want to have a two-way conversation. They just want to direct it one way. And that's going to go downhill. And it has already gone downhill due to that.
Wow. Now, let's go a little bit different here. Let's change topics. When it comes to thrillers, you know, most of us here are thriller writers, that type of thing. What strikes me is emotion. You know, whenever I've read a book that I really enjoyed or listened to, you know, either I read it or listened to it, it's how you feel after you're done with it or when you're going through it. You may not remember all the specifics, like the character's name or this location or whatever, but you'll all, you know, like a month or 2 months or 6 months later, you'll remember how you felt. Now, how do you inject that into your story? What's some of the best practices that you can think of?
That's hard. You know, I try to think back when I was a detective, and how I felt, and I try to put that into words, and it's really difficult to do.
It is. It's a lot harder than you think.
Those emotions on paper is very, very difficult. But I know exactly what you mean, because when I finished reading a Harry Bosch, Michael Connelly book, and I swore I wouldn't bring him up, but here I am. When I finish reading one of those, I'm like, I want to go back to work. I want to unretire and go back.
And your
to
wife
work.
says no.
So yeah, I feel your pain with that. It's really difficult to do, to get that reader invested in those same emotions you had when you were working, or for somebody who never had the job, it's even harder.
Right, but you don't have to be a cop to write good emotions in a story. I don't think.
No, but here's an interesting question for everyone here, all of you. When you read those books, Rick, or Patrick, Adam, Jerry, have you ever stopped in the middle of reading the book when you have that emotion to try to understand how did they say something that gave you that emotion? And if not, why not? And if you have, what did you learn?
Yeah, I have. I've tried to, when I read, I try to read like a writer. If you understand what that means is, I try to, as I'm reading, I try to dissect what he's doing, what that writer is doing. And it's very difficult, but you kind of learn over time how to do that, but it kind of ruins the book for you too. When you're reading a book to learn how a writer is manipulating you, maybe that's the wrong word, but they are in effect.
They are, yeah,
manipulating your
100%.
When you're trying to figure out how they do that, you kind of it's kind of like talking during a movie, oh, you know why he did that?
Yeah, but what did you learn? What did you learn? Because that's really the basis of Patrick's question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Jerry, let me jump to Jerry because her head's going up and down.
Yeah, because I understand what you were saying, but I think even as a reader, whether you're a writer or not, when you see that the author has gotten you, you take that time to say, damn, he's good.
Yeah.
And you go back in and even as a reader, just why do I love this character so much? What is it that he's saying, that he's done? I just read an old John Gresham book. I think it was called Temptation. Anybody know that one?
Mm-mm.
Where he's a lawyer and he's been sent to
shocking,
of course, but he's been sent to South America to find a missionary who's been inherited like millions of dollars, and of course she's a missionary, she doesn't want it, and it's a fantastic book. But it was at the end of that book that it was like I was overcome with emotion. It was a wonderful redemption story. And again, as a reader, I was so emotionally tied into that book. And then, as a writer, then I went back just to see what were those things that he did. And it was all, and it just seemed like what he did is he took this man that was a terrible person. Of course, he was a drunk and a womanizer, and, he ignored his kids, and he made him so human as he met the indigenous people from South America, as he met them and he started learning things and he was amazed by what they did and how they lived. He started to look at his own life and just realized the mistakes that he made, and each step of the way that John Gresham took us along that path. And the emotions just grew and grew. It was just wonderful. It was just wonderful as a reader and then as a writer to see how he did that, and didn't tell us to like this guy or to give this guy another chance, but just showed us every step of the way and little small things that he did around the natives that he met that just made you just really want to see this guy come out at the end. And it was a wonderful story.
I think
it was like a slow burn.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah.
So you had to be invested in that character first.
Right.
Yes.
Whether you hated him or loved him or thought he was a jerk or he was a good guy, whatever you thought, you had to be invested in that character.
But it was a little bit at a time, and you didn't see it coming, but then it just grew and it just grew. It was wonderfully done. It was really wonderfully done. And all of my books are basically have a redemption theme too, and I just kind of like that. And so that's why I love this book. And definitely this, the third novel that I'm writing now, I'm trying to find ways to have you fall in love with the character a little bit and a little bit, just to see how she's growing, so that you're trying to root for her along the way. And it's really fun trying to learn from John.
Yeah,
As I put it in my own work.
I think a lot of it is, circling back to emotion again. If you're going to have this stoic character that is, like the typical cop, whatever, people are going to get bored with that. Give him some problems, give him or her some problems, give him some marital issues, give him some physical ailments, maybe a sick kid at home. These are all very real things. And that gets the reader invested in this. Or, a lot of thrillers, your main character has a history. They have something in their past that's very painful that they're dealing with. Then you stack on top of that all the stress and pressure of their job that most people can't do or don't want to do. And then they go home and it's not all hunky-dory and everything's rosy. You make them human beings with all their flaws and the good things they do and the bad things they do. I think that's one of the keys there. I read a book, I'll give examples for fiction and nonfiction. Nonfiction, it was a book that I listened to. It was narrated. It's called When Breath Becomes Air. And I still remember listening to this book in my car, and I got to the gym and I just couldn't get out of my car because it was that compelling. And it's a story of this surgeon. He's like, I don't know, 30 something years old, gets married, has this great life ahead of him, and gets lung cancer. And it's terminal. So they're deciding, they were trying to get pregnant. Him and his wife were trying to get pregnant, and she was a doctor as well. So she understood very well what was going on. It's like, should we bring a child into this world knowing that you're not going to be around? And he narrates most of the book, and it stops and his wife finishes it because he dies. And I mean, just thinking about it now, I get goosebumps. It was that powerful. And then something that I never thought would affect me at all was science fiction. Project Hail Mary, Andy Weir, the guy who wrote The Martian. I thought it was long and a little long on technical stuff that it didn't have to be. But the ending, I was just like, wow, that's really cool. And, it kind of gave you hope. And that was uplifting. And it came from a very, a source that I didn't think it would be.
And Andy Weir should be like a god for all indie writers.
Yes.
That's how he started. The Martian was originally serialized on his blog. Yep. And he was an indie writer.
Yeah, it was a bunch of blog posts.
Yeah.
And look what he did.
I think the key with the emotion stuff is that it has to be relatable. As a reader, I have to connect with the character. I have to care, right? And I need not just the hero or the protagonist, but also that antagonist, right? And oftentimes that's the mirror image, if you will. Right now, I'm reading a book, nonfiction book by Mark Manson. It is the second book in the first book you may have seen on the bookshelves that was called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which was an excellent book. But the second book I picked up, and it was one of those ones where it's like I meant to read it, never got around to it. And this one's called Everything is Fucked. Catchy title, but it actually, and he's not wrong. But he actually talks about what makes for a page turning book, right? He talks about, I mean, he really dumbs down psychology for us and talks about the reality of the thinking brain and the emotional brain. But when you have both of them firing together in a book, that's what makes a page turner. So I think anybody that's struggling to connect with a character as a world builder or a storyteller, really coming to understand and, well, first of all, read that book, but really kind of coming to grips with the fact that every character in your story thinks they're the main character of their own story. So your antagonist thinks they're doing, for whatever messed up reason, you know, it's like they think they're doing the right thing. Unless they're a complete, you know, psychopath, and then it's just they don't care. But realistically, you know, when you start seeing yourself in another character, whether you like that part of you or not, I think that's where you start to really care, and start to connect with that character. And then you're like, I need to see what happens next, because I can totally see how this is logically, but more importantly, emotionally going down the road. Emotion is what makes a story move. Nobody's lining up to read police reports at the police station,
Right?
Like, ooh, I can read the latest. No, they're reading stories that actually move them, not are factually correct. And then going to like what we do as far as trying to help writers with the technical stuff. The technical stuff is the stuff that keeps people from putting down the book saying, yeah, right, they don't know what they're talking about. But the reader will suspend that, like, yeah, right thing, as long as they're getting that emotional core story that really moves them. They don't need to know what kind of gun we carry or where our office is really located or whatever it is, as long as they get the payoff of an emotionally moving story.
Yeah, I always say that in the classes that I teach, like the second slide says, the most important thing is your story. So I'm going to tell you about myths and misconceptions and what really happens. But if you need to write something because it works best for your story, then go ahead and write it. But I want you to know at least what is the truth before you make that decision on what you're going to write. But I mean, look at things like X-Files. You know, that was an FBI show and it was totally wrong. But boy, did it do well.
Wait a minute. What are you
The truth is out there, Jerry. What are you talking about?
So the authenticity, you know, can be important. But you're right. You know, the most important thing is the story and whether the story works or not. But I don't want people to make stupid mistakes like about a gun or, you know, whether or not somebody, you know, calls in with their badge number, which, you know, FBI doesn't do. You know, get that basic stuff right at least, you know. But, you know, if you need to make some type of different twist or scenario for your story because that's the way it works best for your story, then go ahead and do it, you know, I mean, but make it a conscious decision.
That is a fine line to walk, because I mean, what the Cops and Writers podcast is all about is getting it right.
Mm-hmm.
And
correct.
And you want to get it right. But at the same time, there's only so many ways to kill people. You know, there's only so many murders. Everybody's in all these books, somebody's going to get murdered. And so what it boils down to is all about the characters. You have to be invested in those characters. And even the antagonist, like you said, he has to believe he's doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
The best antagonists always believe they are right and they are doing the right thing. Even Darth Vader thought he was doing the right thing. You know, he wants a good republic. He wants law and order. You know, it's for everybody's well-being. But you need that antagonist and all the other characters to be full people, to be good characters. That's what drives the story. You know, like I said, there's only so many ways you can kill somebody. You know, it's like, okay, so we're after a murderer. So what? It's the characters' journeys, each character's journey through that story that matters.
Absolutely. I have a quick X-Files story for you, Jerry, or FBI.
I got one too.
So I'm the acting lieutenant. I'm sitting in the chair. One of the clerks comes in. Hey, I got 2 FBI agents at the front counter. They want to talk to you. And I'm like, I didn't do anything wrong lately. Okay. So they go, hey, how's it going? There was like an older gentleman wearing the top coat and suit. And he was probably, and I shouldn't say older, he was probably my age, what I am right now, or maybe even a little bit younger. And there was a younger gal with him that if she was 24, 25, I mean, she was very young. And they sit down in my office and I look at them. Okay, which one's Mulder? Which one is Scully? And he starts just laughing his butt off. And she looks at her and says, Mulder and Scully, what is that?
Oh,
Oh, did he read her the riot act? Oh my God.
Yeah, you should at least know the names, even if you never watched this show.
Yeah.
It had a reboot.
It did.
Yes, it did have a reboot.
All right. Well, tell you what, we're over on time, which is pretty typical for me. That's for sure. I want to end with, we're talking about emotion and all that. When somebody reads one of your books, what do you want them to feel at the end? Do you have like a theme that you like to have at the end? Jerry, you were saying like redemption.
Absolutely.
Is that pretty straightforward with you?
Absolutely. It's I like redemption stories. I like people to, when you first read about the characters, and this is my FBI character as well as the bad guys, I'd like for you to, recognize that they've done something wrong. And then as you're reading the story, get an understanding of why they're doing it. And for those people who want to make a change, to see that change at the end. And I do that for, again, my FBI characters. And I also do it for my subjects. My subjects are usually fraudster, con men, corrupt officials. And I like to see them have a change too. A lot of times people just change their main character, but I like for all of them to recognize what they've done and have made a change at the end. So definitely my theme is redemption.
Okay. Rick?
Yeah, I have generally there are themes throughout. Redemption is one of them. My story, but my stories are basically romance. My wife doesn't agree with me. My other friends
Who would
don't
have thunk
agree
it?
with me. My basic story is really a romance between the main character and his girlfriend, and in between there's a murder or two, that he has to solve. But the main theme throughout every book is this romance. Sometimes it's broken, sometimes it's repaired. They get back together, they break up. It's this romance between the main character and his girlfriend. And like I said, everybody else doesn't agree with me, but to me, that's what it is. But yes, there is always a main theme. It's more often than not, it's about doing the right thing.
Okay.
Always do the right thing, whatever that is.
Michael, how about you? I know you've got a gazillion books, but is there an overwhelming like theme that you want people to walk away from one of your books and say, okay, I just felt that, or, I got this out of it?
Yeah, not so much a theme as I would be honored if they were to close the book and go, I'm ready to reread that. I want to go back in with those characters again. That actually is, to me, the one that, it's a book has to be really engaging for me to try a new book versus going back on something that I know I love and just go reread that if it's old enough that I've forgotten.
Okay. For me, getting back to character, when they're done, the latest fiction that Michael and I are working on, I want them to feel the empathy, maybe a tad bit of sympathy, and there's got to be humor. You got to have some humor in there. Sprinkle that in there, and you got yourself
you are humor.
Whether you want to be or not.
Yeah, well, it's all the ingredients for a decent cop soap opera. So like vintage Hill Street Blues, etc. So that's, sometimes we win the battle, sometimes we don't. but we go down swinging.
Hey, Adam, did you have hair before when you first met Patrick? Because I'm just
I had hair before we started this podcast episode. No, I'm just kidding. No.
I am photographic evidence saying no.
Yeah, no. So, when I started this career, I had a full head of hair. And then about halfway through, I had a beard down, like well below my collar. And then, no, it was, I was in the friend zone with my now wife for about 10 years when I had the beard, and I was called the Beardy Weirdy. And then once I shaved it, all of a sudden I was dateable. So yeah, I'm sticking with the look because she's sticking with me.
You are the definition of slow burn, Adam. If it was 10 years, that is a slow burn romance right there, mister.
That's proof that the nice guys don't always finish last.
There we go. There we go. We'll tell you what. We have been doing this for a while. Let's wrap it up. What?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Rick.
This is something I wanted to ask every writer here. If your book was to be made into a TV series or a movie, who would you want to play the main character?
That's the question I asked. Look at you. Go ahead, Jerry.
I want to know.
Well, I think Patrick knows that I spent about 12 months last year with a production team.
Yep.
Hitting up all the studios, Paramount and Disney and everything that you can think of, trying to pitch a TV show. And we had a number of actresses that came in mind. And of course the dream one would have been Viola Davis, but that was like a big dream. But that didn't work out. But it certainly was fun, trying to get that started.
Is that who you would have chosen?
Oh, who wouldn't have wanted to have her? I mean, have you seen The Woman King? I mean, that's one of the best movies I've seen in a long, long time. But so that would be my answer. But of course, that would definitely be a dream. I think she's busy.
Okay. All right, Rick, how about you?
My wife would like to see my main character as Ryan Gosling, but I always imagine him as Vince Vaughn. Now that's a big disparity.
It is.
I always imagine him as Vince Vaughn.
All right, Michael, I know you have a lot of characters.
I'm going to pass this one to you, actually, Patrick, because with our book that we're doing together, knowing how close the main character is to some of the stuff, who would you put into our book?
Daniel Craig.
Really?
Yes. Older.
Yep.
See.
Well, maybe a younger version.
Craig?
Yeah, a younger version of Daniel Craig. Even like a younger Sean Connery, but more of the Daniel Craig side, because I think he is that versatile. I thought he was a great James Bond, and then Knives Out or whatever that show was. Yeah, I'm like, he's talking with a Southern drawl and all this, and the girl with the dragon tattoo. Mm-hmm. I thought he was fabulous because he wasn't James Bond. He was kind of wimpy, and he got saved by the girl with the dragon tattoo, literally.
I don't know. I'm thinking The Rock.
Oh no, but I'm thinking Daniel Craig that's who I would want. A younger version, perhaps.
Yeah, that works.
How about you, Michael?
Oh, Michael's frozen.
All right, so I'll just say that the only fiction I have that doesn't include something magical or paranormal to speak of, besides with you, Patrick, is a series called Pain and Agony, which I had based on the cop, the buddy movies of cops and agents and everything back in the 80s that I liked, and I had The Rock as in my mind as the main character, Pain.
Yeah, I'll give you a quick Rock story. I was in Savannah, Georgia, on Tybee Island, and there's a lot of films that are filmed on Tybee because it's a lot cheaper than in California. They were doing Baywatch, the one with The Rock and Zac Efron. And my son and I worked out every day at this just little hole in the wall gym in Savannah, and not the best neighborhood, not the worst, whatever. And I see this Ford F-250 Raptor pickup truck, and I'm like, that's like $100,000 pickup truck. It's got all the bells and whistles on it, and I'm like, it does not belong in this parking lot. there's something strange going on here. So we walk in, and my kid at the time is like 20 years old, and he's bodybuilding. And we walk through the door, and who's there but The Rock?
Cool.
And two of his bodyguards that were larger than him.
Wow.
If you can believe that. Yeah, they took up the whole like.
What does he need a bodyguard for?
He had two of them. God. He had two guys with him. And my kid is like, that's The Rock. And I'm like, no, it isn't. And he said, no, Dad, that's The Rock. And I'm looking, and I'm like, sure enough. And he said, what do we do? And I'm like, we leave him alone. That's what we do. And he's walking out, and we just do the gym nod, and I'm like, hey, what's up? And he goes, hey, what's up, guys? And that was it. All right. So fast forward a couple days later, we're on the beach on Tybee, and I'm buying ice creams for everybody on the boardwalk. And I asked this like 16-year-old girl that's working on the ice cream stand. I said, hey, did any of the stars from Baywatch ever come over here? She said, oh yeah, some of them do. I said, who's the nicest guy? And she's like, The Rock, all day long. He tips us really well. He treats us really well. He's just genuinely a nice person. I'm like, okay. So who's the one that's opposite of that? And she's like, Zac Efron. He's an asshole. So that's my Rock story. That's all I have. Adam, how about you? I know you don't have that book yet, but if you did, who would you want playing that? I know you got characters floating around in your follically challenged head.
I have 400. Yeah, exactly. I've got ideas instead of hair. I have 437 days until I retire. So that
you're not counting.
No, not at all. That's when I'll be dipping my toe into the fiction world. But I do owe a nonfiction book before that. Otherwise, my listeners and followers will kill me. But yes. No, so I do have two different story ideas that I'm working on, both with female main characters, but I've not come up with an ideal casting for that. I have ideas of what they look like, but I don't want to jinx it.
Margot Robbie.
I don't know. I mean, she's a wonderful actress, but I don't know how well that would fit with the stories that I have to tell.
Okay. All right. Well, tell you what, like I said, we're way over on time. Let's wrap this up. I'll start with you, Michael. Where can people find out more about you and your work, your books, and all that other good stuff?
Website is LMBPN.com for any of the books that are related to the company. If you want to know more about me, I occasionally, very rarely, but I try to put out a personal email at michael.beehive, spelled BEEHIIV.com, which is a email solution, newsletter solution.com.
All right. Adam?
The website is writersdetective.com. And if you're trying to find me on socials or whatever, you can just add / whatever it is, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, after writersdetective.com, and you'll find me.
All right. Jerry?
You can find me at jerrywilliams.com. You can, my podcast is on wherever you can get your podcast. And Michael, if you have that FBI question, just let Patrick know what it is, and I will be sure to answer it. This has been great. And congratulations again, Patrick, on your 100th episode.
Thank you very much. Rick, how about you?
You can find me at rybickiauthor.com or on Facebook, Richard Rybicki. Easy to find, and the books are on Amazon. Thank you.
How do you spell Rybicki? Because even though I can see it, as a listener, I would have been, what the hell?
Rybicki. Common spelling. Come on.
Of a name I've never ever seen in many years.
You know, it's actually a common Polish name. Believe it or not, it kind of translates into fisher or fisherman. That's it. Yeah, common.
All right.
I know many who are not related.
Again, thank you guys for being on the show. You're here because you're constantly in the top 5 or top 10 of all of my podcast guests. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everybody else who's been on the show. And of course, my dear listeners, thank you so much.
Congrats
on
100.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.